Howdy everybody, and welcome to the fourth Think Big Millionaire Mindset Club meeting of the year. It's so absolutely awesome to have you here. A lot of you will have been in the original meeting and the recording quality was quite poor, so we've been able to re-record this session for you today with our guest speaker who we're blessed to have here, and his name is Dan Williamson. So I'm going to introduce Dan to you shortly, and Dan will talk about how he made a decision one day to create something new in his life, and how he made a decision one day to kind of walk away from the norm and an ordinary life, and to turn himself into an extraordinary person, and equally at the same time then to be able to live an extraordinary life. The great thing about Dan is that he's just going through that at the moment. So Dan, just tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of get started on that. So if you would, although you can't clap, but I'm sure you'd love to just put your hands together for Dan Williamson.
Thank you very much. Basically, I got into acting around about a year ago now, a year and a half, and I was originally invited to an acting class by a friend of mine, and he was saying how much fun it was, and I'd always kind of had a little bit of a pipe dream about doing it, and loved movies and loved quoting movies and things like that, but I never really thought it was a real possibility. And I've been doing a lot of personal development type stuff as well, and I decided to give it a go. And I think because I was doing something that I really loved to do and I was feeling great about it, I started to attract more and more opportunities to act. I've recently done 4 short films. I've done 2 national commercials and appeared in a feature film as well. So yeah, that's pretty much how I got into it.
And I believe that you may be able to, you may be on to something on the weekend. Are we allowed to talk about that or not? Is that something that's going on for you right now?
It's a maybe, but we'll probably best not
talk about it.
Just in case, I don't want to jinx it. No?
All right, and I won't mention the name Arnold Schwarzenegger and Dan Williamson in the same sentence.
Yeah.
All right. So, Dan, for you, was there a moment in your life where you had a bing moment? Was there? I know that you've studied quantum physics.
Yeah.
I know that you've had quite an experience with quantum physics and the study of it. Mm-hmm. But was there a moment whereby, with your study of quantum physics and how you're living today, that there was a moment that you just went, bing, there's something new here. I need to check this out and look at it and see, does it give me any additional quality to my life?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I originally, I got into it. It was weird because I taught myself how to play guitar when I was younger, and I got to quite a proficient level just from teaching myself. And I thought, I wonder if I can learn about science and life and the universe just by teaching myself in the same way. So I began to get lots of books on physics. My mum's a librarian, and I basically ended up getting every single book from her library and then some, and started to bit by bit teach myself about quantum physics. And I learned that basically the role of the perceiver in any reality is basically what creates that reality. So without a perceiver, it's like the age-old question: if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? And quantum physics says, well, when there's no one perceiving it, reality, it's kind of infinite, and every quality in the universe is indistinguishable from every other quality. And you're basically choosing perceptually, either consciously or unconsciously, which reality out of the infinite realities that you're going to tune into.
Okay, so is that like the analogy of the guy that wakes up in the morning and he has a good day, bad day kind of thing? I won't go into that right now because we do talk about it in a while. But whereby we kind of wake up in the morning and we decide not only from a daily perspective how our day is going to be, but we're so kind of blinded by years of indoctrination that we then at one stage in our life decide how almost our whole life is going to be. Would you agree with that kind of?
Yeah, definitely. I think you get conditioned into looking at reality a certain way, and it can be hard to break free of that because the evidence is right there. The thing is, there's a thing called in psychology, there's a concept called what is it? forget what it's called now. It's a bias. It's a kind of bias that you have towards your beliefs. You end up proving your beliefs are actually right. And that goes for anything. And so the thing is, when you perceive something, you tend to believe it more because it's more concrete, it's more real, it's there in your face. So the evidence is there. But there's evidence for a lot of things that you might experience otherwise that you're not experiencing because you think that that's real and that's the only reality. But there's more realities to choose from than we actually perceive.
Did you say your mum's a librarian?
Yeah.
Well, I'm an Aquarian. I don't know her, but that's okay. And it's funny because the HeartMath Institute done a study, and they proved that 50% of the things that we said happened to us in the past, we completely made it up. Never happened at all. Yet our past perceptions of our experiences and our past experiences determine today how we make judgment on people, things, life, opportunities that come into our life right now. So therefore, when we make those determinations on what we're going to do in our life and what we're going to do for our future, when we do that, we're basing that half on information that is completely wrong.
Absolutely.
They also proved that 75% of the worries and concerns that we have when we try to do something new, so the worries and concerns that we have for our future, never ever happen. So in other words, half the stuff in the past never happened, and 3/4 of the stuff in the future that we think are going to happen are an issue, never happen. Sorry, that's Arnold Schwarzenegger just ringing Dan. I'll just switch that off. Right. Okay. So tell us, you came along. I'll just talk influential people in the world. So the number one most influential, spiritually influential person in the world is a guy called Eckhart Tolle. Number 2 is the Dalai Lama. And number 3 is Wayne Dyer. Number 66 is a guy called Dr. John DeMartini. Now, we've met John, you've met him, and we've done some traveling with him and whatever. And the guy really, really is a pure genius. Arnold, he'll ring you back.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. He really is a pure genius. Just tell me, what, and not only is he a pure genius, I find John is very open, but he's very busy. When you go to a John seminar, during the lunch break, there's a queue of, it depends on how many's there, but I've seen a queue of 40, 50 people just wanting to queue up to say hi to him or shake his, and literally just shake his hand and walk off and get a photograph taken. But when you met him, he invited you out to dinner.
That's right.
Not that he's a cannibal, but he invited you out to dinner.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Well, if anyone who's familiar with John's work will tell you that a lot of what he talks about is values. And if you communicate to someone in terms of their highest values, they're more receptive to you and more open to hearing what you have to say.
Right.
So I know for a fact that John DeMartini is interested in quantum physics. And I thought it would be nice to have an opportunity to meet him and talk to him about it. So I just got talking to him about quantum physics and some of the ideas that I've had. And he kind of was like, wow, that's great. You know, we had a lot of ideas that were very similar. So he said, we'll have a chat later on. And I didn't really think anything of it. And then later on, I caught him going through the foyer, and he's like, I'm just going to go have dinner in about half an hour. You're welcome to join me. And I thought it was going to be like a whole bunch of people down there having dinner, because you did know some of the people that were there. And it turned out it was just me and him. So I got to have a conversation with one of the smartest men on the face of the earth and pick his brain for about an hour, which was absolutely fantastic.
Was there something you took away from that?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed, I discussed one of the theories that I've had about quantum physics, and it was just interesting to see that we'd sort of drawn the same conclusion. And what it boiled down to was that there is an unperceived infinite realm that gets transformed into a quantized finite realm of the senses. And this has been proven in science, and there's a science called quantum electrodynamics, which Ray and I were just discussing before. And basically what they've done is they've learned how to cast the infinities out of the equation, but no one's ever explained it. No one's ever explained why these infinities come up, and it's to do with quantum field theory. And we sort of had agreement about that there needs to be like an explanation of why that happens. Why is there infinity? So it's almost like what I learned from talking to John was that there's an infinite realm, and our senses are kind of filtering out from infinity a particular set of circumstances, our reality, our life. So if that's the case, then we can look at that infinite reality and choose from it different experiences to the ones we're having.
Okay. How'd you go in school?
Terrible.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Terrible. Failed?
I failed everything at school.
Right. Okay. And how come somebody who failed in school is able to, sit with one of the most intelligent guys on the planet and be able to speak the way that you spoke? So what I suppose, the different question, if you failed in school, well, then you came out of school with a perception that you failed, right? Okay. And you were probably indoctrinated in school for 12 or 13 years to be told, look, if you don't do well at exam time, you're going to have a difficult life. All right. How'd you break that?
Well, that was all down to learning guitar. I learned guitar and taught myself when I was 15. I'd always been told that I was stupid, that there was something wrong with me and things like that by the people around me. And I picked up a guitar when I was about 14, 15, and I realized that I can do this because no one had ever actually knew whether I could or couldn't. So no one was prepared to say anything. So there was no belief there about whether or not I could do it. So I began to teach myself, and then within like 3 years, there's kids at school that had been doing it for 10 years and actually had lessons. They were asking me how to play stuff that I was playing. And I thought, well, if I could teach myself that, perhaps I could teach myself more about life and the universe. And I got a book by Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time, and it was all perfectly written for the layperson. And I thought, wow, I can understand a lot of this. So I kept reading, I kept researching, I would write down everything I could remember about it, and then I'd go back and read again. I'd read what this guy said. I'd have like 6 books open on gravity and read what each person said, and I'd go back and write as much as I could remember down, test myself. And then eventually I built up a lot of understanding about all the different fields of physics, like quantum physics, relativistic physics, quantum chromodynamics, and all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So are you saying that when you found your passion, school wasn't your passion?
No.
But when you found your passion, the idea that you were stupid or that you hadn't done well was just complete.
Yeah.
It was wrong, really, wasn't it?
A lot of it was driven by my void. So I felt intelligence was missing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So, and knowledge was missing. So I had this tremendous feeling of void about knowledge. So then when you sense a void, you go out to fulfill it, and that's what controls your motoring output in the world and what you give your attention and intention to.
Right. So you're saying that you're able to change kind of your potential reality from, if you had fallen for that school indoctrination, you haven't done well in school, Dan, so you're not going to have a good life. So the power of the human mind to change is quite strong, is it?
Very, yeah.
So the ability is quite high.
You've got to shut out every other thought. I mean, even when I first started playing guitar, people would be like, "Turn that thing off," it sounds terrible, but you just got to ignore them, ignore everyone else, focus on what you love, and just keep taking action towards it. And when you stuff up, you keep taking another action. You keep doing it.
Joe Dispenza done a survey on great thinkers.
Yeah.
And he tried to work out the common denominator between a great thinker and an achiever. Because we all have the ability to think great, and we all do think great. We've all had big dreams, and if we're not able to make them up ourselves when we're conscious, our sleep does that for us. When we're kind of in our subconscious, it will give us awesome dreams at nighttime when we're sleeping. So we have that ability to do that. And he kind of came to the conclusion that great thinkers never focus on the current reality. And the current reality is people telling them you can, you can't, you mustn't, you shouldn't, you do, and you don't. And they have to think beyond that. And because that feedback that we get from our environment creates this kind of subvocalization that talks us out of our own greatness and out of our own ability to be great. So he says, look, you have to think beyond your environment. So you have to kind of remove yourself from the familiarized feelings of the memorized self, because that becomes your memory, and your memory then becomes your feeling. So not only do you not think great, but you don't feel great. And then when you have a new idea and your mind talks you out of your new idea, it's actually your body talks you out of the new idea first before the brain does. And next of all, you're not thinking worthy. And a moment later, you're not feeling worthy. So now the two parts of you that you need to be aligned with each other are just aligned in the wrong way. Yeah. René Piaget is a French scientist, and he done a study on the power of the mind, and he wanted to understand what is the power of a mind. It can be any mind. So he constructed this random movement device. We'll call it a robot for short. Yeah. and it was about the size of a can of soft drink. He built a pen, and he put this random device on its own battery power into this pen, and just watched as it just covered the entirety of the pen. He then hatched some baby chicks next to it. The chicks followed the random device around, thinking it was its mother. After a while then, he had a pen constructed next to the original pen, and he had a screen in between both. He took the chicks from the pen that they were in, where the device was just randomly moving around the whole pen continuously, and he put them in the pen next door. So the chicks couldn't move with the device anymore, but it could see it and focus on it. And the device stopped moving in the half of the pen where the chicks were no longer, and only moved in the half of the pen where the chicks were focused. So the point about, and that's one of thousands of experiments that we could just sit here, you and I, and talk about all day long. So for a moment, if the combined thought pattern of 20 baby chicks can influence something like that, that's completely removed from them, and that the concept of doing that 20 years ago was completely removed from us, just imagine the power that our mind has to move and create and build. So, you know, the guy that gets up in the morning and thinks to himself, life is terrible. It's really bad. It's really difficult. Obama could get another shot at the presidency. Julia Gillard could be prime minister again. The economy's about to collapse. There's a war all over the world. What the hell am I doing here? It's most likely he's going to get up that day and have a reasonably bad day. Same guy gets up the next day and he just has a completely different outlook on life, and he thinks, you know what, it's raining outside, but that's just life falling from the sky. What an awesome world I live in. I hope Julia gets in, because I don't give a damn whether she does or doesn't. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to live outside of everybody. He's going to have a reasonably good day. So therefore, which of the two realities are true? Which of the two potentials are real? The answer really is that both are. He just decided which one he was going to collapse his wave function into, and why he was going to turn into reality for him. So therefore, why can't you get up one day and say to yourself, I'm going to be a movie star. I'm going to be financially free. I'm going to have a great relationship. I'm going to build an awesome empire. I'm going to build a phenomenal property portfolio. I'm going to build some great wealth for myself. I'm going to leave my job and I'm going to live the life that I want to live, because most of us actually end up living life determined by how we perceive, think, and believe that people expect us to live. So we fall into the kind of realm of expectation, thinking that if we step outside of it, that people are going to think that we're stupid, and people are going to think that we're just big dreamers. Well, I can tell you what, I'd rather be a big dreamer than the dreamer that just sits there all day long and simply does nothing but have a thought. So the lesson of today is this, is that I want to talk, we want to talk for a little bit about the content to, so it's just gone out of my head, process shift. So I've written something about it before we started, and we'll just talk about that in just a moment. I know this is something that's kind of high in your values, Dan, is that, our perceptions are not just observers of reality, they're the creators of it. Yeah. Do you want to talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah. Well, what shall I use that? I'll use a good analogy. Okay. So imagine your brain is like a radio receiver, and there's lots of different frequencies you can be tuning to. I got the initial idea of this from Teachings of Abraham, by the way, if anyone's interested in that.
That's called it. What is it called?
The Teachings of Abraham by Esther Hicks.
Esther Hicks. Yeah. ESTHER.
Yeah.
HICKS. Yeah.
That's the one. And she uses the analogy of that you're tuned into a certain frequency at any particular point in time. So there are a lot of things when you sit in front of a radio and you want to tune in a certain station to it. There are a lot of different signals going there at the same time, simultaneously in the air. They're all there. They're all present. But you're tuned into your specific station. So what can happen is if you try and tune out of that station, well, what's the first thing that happens when you tune out of a radio station? The first thing that you get is static. So what most people do in their life is they get a bit of static, whether it's someone saying that they can't do it or that they're not good enough, or their own beliefs about it, or some obstacle pops up and they go, oh, there's too much static, I'm going to go back to the station that I know and kind of listened to for all these years. But if you keep tuning through the static, eventually you start to hear the music of the next station coming through, and that little bit of evidence that something different is happening is enough to spur you on. And you do get that. You get this little bit of sometimes you get a synchronicity or something like that, and it keeps you on the right path, and you tune in, and then before you know it, you're in the new reality that you want. And that's basically boils down to perception is not reality. It's commensurate with reality, to sort of coin Socrates, but it's not reality itself. And the word I was searching for before was confirmation bias. So you tend to prove what you think is true, and you have like a confirmation bias because you believe it. And it's not always that true. There's lots of different things you could be tuned into right now that you're not seeing.
Okay, so we're still good for time. So I just want to give you some idea around why ideas fail. So ideas fail for 5 reasons. When you have a new idea, there's a lot of churning around that's going to go on in the brain. And I'll just give you my kind of overview on that. Is that if I threw you into a bath of freezing cold water, your brain will steal energy from the extremities of your body. You'll literally get frostbite in your arms, fingers, and toes, while the brain and the heart and the organs, the brain just makes sure it's preserved and grabs all the energy for itself. When we have a new idea, a new business we want to build, a new path we want to take, a new journey that we want to go on, what happens is the brain sees that as an energy thief, because with a new idea comes problem solving. With problem solving comes more thinking. With more thinking comes more energy. So therefore, the brain and the body will combine together. And the body in its own right is a complete drug addict. We got 70 trillion drug addicts in our body, 70 trillion cells that have been bathed in the same chemical emotion for the last 5-10 years. And that doesn't want to change either. So 5 things that will come to visit you and try and steal your dreams away are time. We will always tell ourselves, we don't have time for this. We'll put it off till tomorrow. We'll do this another day. And time, from that perspective, would be just to make that kind of, give it to you in a different way. If you have no kids right now, and I came to you 9 months ago and said, listen, I got a new little baby boy here, and he's a month old. I'm going away for a week. Look, would there be any possibility you'd look after him? You'd say to me, are you kidding? I don't have the time for that. Yet, 9 months down the road, if some of you miraculously got pregnant, 9 months down the road and you had a baby, all of a sudden you've got all the time in the world. So it was just completely an illusion, and it was delusional to think that you didn't have the time. Okay. Number 2 is money. Now I talk a lot about wealth and property and shares and finance and wealth strategies, and financial freedom is really my passion thing. So I talk a lot about that, and I hear it all the time. Right, I don't have the money for that. Well, let me tell you, when we were born, we were put onto this earth with absolutely nothing. Nothing. We came with nothing, we will leave with nothing. Everything in between we made. You didn't get fed unless you cried when you were a baby. Otherwise, your mum wouldn't know. So you're demanding all the time. The demand stopped when you fell for somebody else's story. And you fell for somebody else's story, and the story that a lot of people fell for is this, is that you need money to make money. So point number 2 is that we do not need money to make money. Point number 3 was the third thing that steals our dreams away. And the third thing that steals our dreams away is other people's opinions. So we decide to do something new and something awesome. We mention it to our dad, our mom, the mate down the pub, the life coach expert in the local shop down the street, and all of a sudden he tells us it's a ridiculous idea, and there we go. Next is what we call, and this is a John DeMartini word, I believe, self-righteousness. Yeah?
Yep.
Okay. And self-righteousness goes like this. And again, I've seen this when I come to somebody with a new idea and say, listen, this really fits you. This is where you can go with this thing. They go, do you know what? Give it to someone else. It's okay. It's all right. I don't need it. I'm okay, Jack. And, we're not okay. And that is just a perception that we're not worthy. That's our own internalization, our own internal perception that we're just not worthy of. I'm not going to be able to carry this through is really what they're saying. So when somebody says to me, "No, it's okay, Ray, look, it's a darned good idea, it's a darn good thing, or thanks for that," I'm not going to take it. All they're doing is they're saying, "Look, I don't believe in myself to be able to carry this through." And again, that's somebody else's story. That's not yours. And self-righteousness then is whereby you may go to an event. I remember watching Richard Branson speak. Now, Richard Branson's a very, very successful guy.
Yeah.
Apparently, he owns some airplane or something like that. I don't know, something like that, yeah. But he's a very successful guy. And even with Richard Branson sitting there, there's people in the audience, and I've studied body language, and they're sitting there with their arms folded, shoulders hunched forward, head down a little bit as though they're overlooking their glasses, which they don't have on, and the legs in a figure four. What that's saying is this: who the hell do you think you are? Right. And what they're really saying is they're the self-righteous people that say, everything that I have in my life right now, there is nothing else that I need to know. I know it all. Yeah. But they've never made it. They've never been successful. So when you're faced with a new idea, if you can walk away from those 5 constraints and just understand that they are somebody else's story, self-righteousness, other people's opinions, money and time, and remove yourself from those 5, you will absolutely dearly want to and be driven to follow through with your idea, whatever that idea is. Yeah. So everything we are and have is a consequence of our thinking. We've enclosed ourselves in a box made up of our preconceptions, fears, guilt, and feelings of failure and hopelessness and so on. But they really are somebody else's, I suppose, story, isn't it, really?
That's right, yeah. I think as well, what traps a lot of people where they are is they worry about how they're going to do this. And we talked about this last time. If you ask yourself how really is the domain of things that you've already done? Like, how do I drive this car? You can ask yourself that question and get a reasonable answer because you've done it before. But in order to do something that you've never done before, you have to get rid of how. And this is something that I actually learned from Mitch during one of the seminars. And if you get rid of how, you're kind of freeing up all your unconscious and conscious resources to work on the answer and to change your perception a little bit so that you'll now filter something else out in your reality. If you ask yourself how you're going to do something that you've never done before and you don't really believe, your brain will come up with the answer. It'll say, it can't be done. We've never done this before. So you'll stop dead in your tracks and you won't take any action. But if you can get yourself into a state of certainty, this is what sort of helps you break out of that box, is you get yourself into a state of certainty without the evidence present, and you start to say, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I am going to do it. And a path will light up and you'll start to see the evidence of that. It sort of overrides that how part of everything. It's like, and DeMartini quotes this a lot, I think it was Nietzsche who sort of came up with the idea, a man with a big enough why can bear any how. It doesn't matter what's happening or how to get there. You'll find the answer on the way there, as long as you're certain that you'll do it. And for me, that's getting into a physiology of certainty, the way you use your body, the way you think to yourself, everything, the way you breathe, the way you posture. You get yourself into a state of certainty and you say, I don't know how this is going to happen, but it will. And a good example of that for me was how do you get work as an actor, paid work, because you need an agent to get a job, but you need to have worked to get an agent. So if you try and figure out how you're going to do that, you just go round and round in a circle and you'll go, well, it can't be done. But if you just trust that you can do it, some way will unfold for you. Like for me, my acting teacher ended up getting a call for a commercial, and I ended up getting a commercial. And then after that, every agent in town wanted to sign me. So you just get out of how, don't worry about how, just know that you can and get into a state of certainty about something. Even though the evidence isn't there directly, you will create the evidence as you go. And when you do that, if you try that, the evidence will be all you need to prove that it's right.
So what happens there is that when we start to come up with these conclusions ourselves, it's kind of like going to court. In a Chinese court, nothing against the Chinese regime. In a Chinese court, the prosecution comes in with the guilty party and the door is closed. And the poor defense attorney, well, he doesn't even exist actually in most cases. He's locked outside.
Yeah.
So the judge sits there and makes a kind of a very kind of biased decision on what's gone on based on evidence from the prosecution only.
Yeah.
So hence, the jails are full in China. So you need to ask yourself, and the jails are full with people who aren't guilty. So you need to ask yourself, in your mind, how full is your jail? Because most of your decision and to move forward in your life is based on the Chinese legal principles of, I'm only going to listen to the negative side. I don't want to hear the positive. And then we wonder why we fail. And that's why 95% of us in the Western world never reach financial independence, because we're told there's a scarcity of money in our world. We see economic trends, economic conditions. We hear the news at night time. We hear about the mining downturn, the mining upturn, and whatever it might be. And we fall for this whole thing and believe that it's part of us.
By what is, and and it just takes over you. But that's the thing. In reality, it's hard to, it's not an easy thing to do, because everything's right there in your face. The evidence is right there, and you've got that confirmation bias, and you're like, well, look, this is what my life reflects. So you keep going through the same thing over and over again. So the idea is to learn how to break through that thinking and realize that there is more to choose from, and you can do it. And there's lots of different possibilities that you might not be aware of. You're filtering possibilities and missing things that are present right around you right now. Everyone's doing it. But
John Canary, he used to speak with Bob Proctor.
Right, yeah.
And John Canary said this. He said, it's only a fool who would take information, new information, and completely reject it. It's only a fool who would take new information and completely accept it. But it's only the successful people in our world who take that new information, play around with it, and try it out, and see does it fit in, and they're the ones that make it.
Absolutely.
So we were talking about the content to process shift. So from that perspective, we really, really do have to learn how to shift. So as Greg Braden says, we have to get our shift together. So I'll just give you an overview of that. And what we do is, we're so focused on the content of our perception that we're so unaware of the patterns of our perceptions, and how those patterns, which you and I call habits, are the cause of so many of the problems that appear to be happening to us. So, when we focus on our past experiences and our past problems, our mind and our life merge together as one, and then kind of reality responds to that equally. So in other words, we get exactly what we're thinking. Henry Ford said, if you think you can, you think you can't, you're right. Either way, you're right. So we get signals from our environment through our senses and through the processes of generalization, distortion, and deletion. There are three processes that the brain goes through when it gets information. It generalizes it, it distorts it, or deletes it. Now, you've done a Ben Harvey course recently, and Ben talks about the power of the hindbrain to take what we perceive as new information in, and if it just doesn't seem to fit, we spit it out through the amygdala, and it's a one-way valve and never comes back again. Right. And so, in other words, what Dan and I are saying, without getting too technical, is that most of us, our brains are hardwired to reject anything new that comes into our life, and to turn it down as preposterous, or to turn it out as not fitting and not for us. So what we do is, we take these generalizations and then we filter them into an internal representation, and then our previously established programs based on things we saw and stories we heard, this experience of the event isn't exactly what happened, but it's rather a kind of an internal representation. So in other words, that's Austin Vickers, by the way, and what Austin Vickers was saying there was that we have our own decision-making processes in our brains, that when we see something new, it automatically goes, bump, back to the Chinese judge again. He must be guilty. Let's execute him, and off we're marched. And all our new ideas, we wonder why at the end of the day we failed, and we failed because we were the greatest executioners of new ideas. Wow. So we have four. We now know scientifically the study into the power of the human brain at the moment has really, really taken momentum over the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah. And we now know that we are aware of 4 billion bits of information, just call it, that hit our brain on a daily basis. Now, if we were to be aware of only 10% of that, that means that we would have 40 million new thoughts a day, which is just impossible for us to do. But the fact and the reality is this, is that we're actually only aware of 2,000 bits of information on a daily basis that come to visit us. So therefore, with 4 billion bits of information coming in through our senses, what is it that's going on around us that we just fail to see, that we can't see anymore? But I think the scary thing about that is this, is that 2,000 acknowledgements or 2,000, the awareness of 2,000 things per day that's happening to us through our senses is only 1/1,000% of reality. So therefore, we know closer to zero than we do to even 1% of what's going on in our world.
Absolutely, yeah. That's like a remarkable statistic, really, when you think about it. Less than 1%.
You know, I'll just talk about, like, for a moment, what's going on in our minds, right? And I'll just give you an example. We all have this perception of failure in one extent or another, right? And then failures are down to all sorts of things that we may have done or experienced in the past. Yeah, okay. But we all have our failures, and we try to hide them. We never express them and talk about them. So in doing that, those we could call our darkest secrets. But we all have dark secrets. And it's like a mosaic. If you take a mosaic and you look at it, it really is a work of art. It's got little glass pieces and it's fine art, and it's known as fine art. If you take that mosaic and you break it on the floor and you pick it up, you'll see little shards, little black pieces, little dark pieces, little glass bits, little ceramic. It'll even cut you. And it just looks like it's nothing. And that's us. We are nothing. But when we're put together like this, like a mosaic, we absolutely are a complete another work of art.
Yeah.
We're the most, as we understand it right now, we have the most powerful tool in the universe at our disposal. But what are you doing with it? How are you living your life?
Absolutely. And I think, so the key is, it all boils down to what you believe. So your beliefs are basically informing your perception about what it wants to filter from that infinite reality. So the trick is to change your beliefs, because that's the only place you can. Like, your beliefs determine how much potential you use. The amount of potential you use determines how much action you take and what kind of action. And that creates your outcome, which either confirms or denies the belief. So that's where the confirmation bias comes from. You go, see, I knew I couldn't do it. Then you take less action next time, and the actions get weaker, you use less of your resources. But if the same thing happens, if you change the belief, you change the amount of potential you use, and which creates a better action, which creates a better outcome, which you then go, oh, see, I knew I could do that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it feeds into itself, and you get momentum. That's how you get momentum. That's how the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So it's like a belief cycle. So the way to change the belief is first to question the beliefs that you have. That helps to deconstruct the beliefs. And that's the way out of this whole loop. And then think of reasons why the new belief could be true. And eventually you can kind of coax yourself away from the old belief and into a new belief about reality. That's
right. You recommended a book. Now, there's people in Ireland that watch these webinars, so from the Irish perspective, it's called a book,
right,
but it's actually a book. Paul McKenna. Can you just go over that again briefly?
Yeah, well, like I started listening to Paul McKenna a few years ago. He's got quite a few books out. He's got, and his books usually have an accompanying CD. It's a mind programming CD. He's a renowned hypnotist. He's worked a lot with Richard Bandler, the guy who invented NLP and stuff like that. And he's been featured on TV a lot in the UK and things like that. Basically, he's got this CD now, and it programs you to be more lucky. It changes your perceptual filters so that you notice more experiences of luck in your day-to-day life, and helps you actually become more luckier. I know it sounds a bit weird, but I've been doing it for a couple of weeks now, and I've absolutely noticed the difference between when I listen to it and when I don't. And I listen to it the first thing in the morning, I put it on, Like we said before, you can either choose to have a bad day or a good day. I think if you do something every morning and it doesn't necessarily have to be a Paul McKenna CD, it could be doing affirmations, it could be doing a gratitude list. We talked about John DeMartini does a gratitude list every time he gets out of bed. You're starting the day off on the right foot. If you try and start trying to think positive or try and get inspired at around 3 o'clock after everything's gone bad by default, you haven't intended to have the kind of day that you want, you've got a lot of momentum going the other way, and it's hard to sort of stop that. But if you start off in the right frame of mind, you're setting yourself up for a great day, you know, and rather than hope that it's going to happen by accident, it's better to intend to do it on purpose.
Right. And from the perspective of the brain and the power of the brain, it's physically impossible for us to have an objective view of reality. So the only reality that exists for you is the reality that you've chosen to participate in. And we all choose our own kind of reality from that perspective. So we only take in what we decide to notice. So that limitation, is the thing that creates prison walls. And the prison walls are, the things that kind of defeat us in life. So Austin Vickers said this. He said he gave a great analogy of a movie theater with people watching a movie, and he picked this up from a guy called Aaron, who'd been in jail for involuntary manslaughter in the States, and you kind of go away forever in the States. And this guy needed to get himself out of prison after killing somebody because he was locked away forever. And he decided to just change his whole environment and his whole thinking, so much so that he really stood out from the crowd with the way he changed his thinking from a prison cell. And an example that he gave was this. He said, look, I can sit here and beat myself up my whole life. And he said, to use an analogy, if you were sitting in a cinema watching a movie and you didn't like what's going on the screen, would you get up and run up to the screen and bang the wall? Well, of course you wouldn't. But your life is a movie. You are the star, you are the creator, you are the writer, and you are the director. And if you don't like what's going on there, you're not meant to get up and beat yourself up about it. You're meant to change it.
That's right.
So if you don't like the movie in the movie theater, what if you were able to write your own movie? What would you write? How would you write it? What would it look like? So in other words, if you don't like the canvas of your life right now and the way it seems to be mapped out for you, well, why don't you just get up and do something about it and change it and understand that the moment that you do, two things are going to happen. Fear is going to kick in, and fear is going to try and keep you limited. And number two, everybody around you is going to feel that you can't achieve this new goal, this new place that you want to get to. And because people love you and care for you so much, they'll tell you not to do it. Why? And they'll make you feel silly about it. Why? Or they'll make you feel as though you shouldn't be doing it, because they love you and care for you so much that they don't want to see you disappointed. That's why our loved ones say to us, "Oh, don't do that, son. You mustn't do this. You must step back." That's those big ideas for owning airlines and being a movie star and being a whatever it is are all for other people. You're crazy to follow this dream. It's ridiculous. But let me tell you, you know what? Most successful people, most entrepreneurs on this planet had nothing. Well, that's what entrepreneurialism is, isn't it, in a sense? They absolutely came from nothing and had nothing or anybody.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, we, over time, forgot our own power. Because when we were growing up as kids, we were really creative. We were able to make awesome things happen. We were able to flip up so we could eat dirt. We could eat bat soap and drink the water and not get sick.
Yeah.
Now if we eat dirt and drink the water and eat the soap, we vomit and we get sick. But we didn't when we were younger. So, over time, we do forget the power of who we are and what we can do and where we can go. And then we go back to the prison walls that we built. And those prison walls are, what do you see them as? Perceptions of what?
Yeah, I think the limitation, we see ourselves as limited. I think there's a great analogy for all this. Have you ever read Richard Bach's, I think it's called Illusions of a Reluctant Messiah?
No.
Right, there's a great story at the beginning this guy tells, and he says, a bunch of creatures were living at the bottom of a beautiful crystal river. And he said, The current was very strong, and the creatures at the bottom had made their way of life clinging to the reeds at the bottom of the river, right? And one day, one of the creatures says, I'm going to let go and see where the stream takes me. And the other creatures are like, don't be stupid. You're ridiculous. It's just going to crash you along the rocks. You're going to get hurt. You're going to get injured. You're being silly. So the creature just says, well, look, I've got to do something because this isn't enough for me. So he lets go. And the first time he gets smashed against the rocks. And he grabs back hold of his reeds again. And he's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to have a go. And they're still saying, you're stupid. Forget about it. Again, gets dashed again. Let's go, gets dashed on the rocks. Then the third time, even though everyone's telling him not to do it, he lets go. And the stream lifts him up and carries him off. And all the other creatures are going, wow, look, there's a creature just like us, but he can fly. That's amazing. And I think that's the whole thing. Everyone makes their life this clinging to their safety net.
Yeah, because that safety net is our emotional selves, and we're kind of wired up to be emotional beings. So there's no kind of Mr. Spock, Mr. Logic, within us, kind of encouraging us as to what we should do. So our emotions run our physiology, and they lead to our choices. So the person may say, "Look, I want to be wealthy and successful. I want to live a great life." But like a tennis player, they've memorized negativity. And they've memorized negative defeat, and we tell ourselves stories, and then in doing so we become the most convincing storyteller on the planet, telling ourselves that we can't do this and we can't do that, and then we believe the story so much that we fall for it. So when the body memorizes an emotional pattern and we work around, we end up walking around unconscious all day long because we've memorized an emotional pattern on how we're going to deal with things, and it becomes an automated pattern on how we're going to deal with things, so that when something comes into our life, we're already automated to deal with it. So from that perspective, we do kind of walk around unconscious all day long. So like the tennis player, the tennis player will get out into the tennis court and he'll hit the ball kind of 10,000 times to learn how to serve that ball and get that ball over the net and try and turn it into an ace and whatever they call it. Well, we're the exact same. We've been practicing defeat, regret, I can't do, and we become like the tennis player. We become absolute experts at it. So the one story though, one, and what happens then is that when we have that new idea, and that we're trying to step beyond the memorized self, all of a sudden, just one old thought, one stimulus from the external environment, and we're back thinking the same old thoughts and doing the same old thing, expecting something new to kind of appear in our life.
That's right.
So we do have to be aware of our prison walls, and we have created them. What I want to do is I want to give you some idea of some of the things that you can do from a practical perspective on a daily basis to get to somewhere extraordinary. We are time thieves. We allow our time to be stolen away. And at the end of the day, we tell ourselves, well, we ran out of time to do that. There was, I'll give you a very quick story on time. There was a young kid, and the dad was working all the time. And the dad would be home at 7 and 8 at night. He'd rush to have his dinner, rush into his computer, doing his emails. Just life was typical in the higher end of things. His 5-year-old son, I should say, said to him one night, when they were having dinner, said, "Dad, how much do you earn an hour?" And the dad said, "I'm not telling you that, son. You're 5 years of age. You can't ask your dad these questions." So the son persisted a couple of times, said, "Dad, it's really important to me that you tell me, how much you earn an hour." So the dad said, "Okay, well, look, I'll tell you." He said, "I earn $100 an hour." The kid went, "Wow." He said, "That's great." He said, "Dad, can I borrow $50? And the dad thought, well, gee, you're after setting me up here. You have to set me up to borrow $50 off me. You're 5 years of age. No, he said, you cannot, and you should never, ever do that. And certainly don't do that to your dad. Now, that was the wrong thing to do. Now, finish up your dinner and get up to your room and don't come down for the whole night. And don't ever try and trick me like that again." So the kid goes up to his room, and the dad's sitting there, and the mum says to him, "You're very hard on him." And he goes up to the room, whatever, and he sits with him, and he says, "Look, that was the wrong thing to do, and you shouldn't have done this." And the kid says, "Okay, Dad, that's okay." He said, "But I won't ask you again. But I really need $50. So the dad thought, gee, it must be important to him. So he put his hand in his pocket and gave him $50. The kid takes the $50 and lifts up his pillow, and here's some other notes under there. And he puts it with the other notes. And the dad gets furious. He thinks, you're hoarding money under your pillow. What the hell are you doing? And the kid takes out all his money from under his pillow and counts it out. And he's got exactly $100. And he says to the dad, Dad, can I buy 1 hour of your time? So we have to see where we're guilty of that. Now, most of us have 20% of the things that we do in our day that add to 80% of our problems. We've also got 20% of the things that we do in our day that add to 80% of our upside, of our happiness, of the great things that we're doing in our life. If you want to be practical about growing, you need to look at what it is that you do on a daily or weekly basis, and you need to find and locate the 20% of things that you do that cause your unhappiness and your stagnation, so in other words, where you can't grow, and you need to create a not to-do list, and you need to be very adamant in adding them to your not to-do list, and you need to then follow through with that.
Yeah.
You need to then create a to-do list, because now you're going to have to replace the 20% of things that you took away, and you're going to have to create a to-do list. And with your to-do list, then you start to add in and add on to the things that you do that add value to your life every day. So from a practical perspective, there's always something that we can do. I'll recommend a great book to those who are really interested. It's by Timothy Ferriss. It's called The 4-Hour Work Week. And it's just an awesome read of a guy who's been very, very, very clever with his time. You know, when we say to people, you can tell that Dan reads a lot. So when Dan says to people, you know, you should read, you should read, you should read. Well, you know what? You know, if your life is based on your knowledge box and your knowledge box is not big enough, well, then it's most likely that your life isn't big enough also. So one is absolutely relative to the other. The more knowledge you have on this planet, the greater the experience that you can have, because you can learn how to break free from who you are right now. When we're given a challenge like that to read, what we do is we chase ease and we try to avoid challenge. So in chasing ease and avoiding challenge, we become kind of delusional in the thought that one goes without the other. But for sure, if you try and avoid challenge now and pursue ease by not doing, and think that it's easy not to do, avoiding the challenge of doing, for certain, the challenge that you're trying to avoid is waiting for you as your future, and all of us, as our future comes railroading like a speeding train down a train track. Our future is coming, whether we like it or don't like it. And the challenge that we think that we're avoiding by not acting and not doing today, it's delusional to think that there is not going to be no challenge in the future. So you're better off taking on the challenges of life today. Absolutely, yeah.
I would just say challenge yourself, because I mean, if you don't challenge yourself physically and you let your body deteriorate, life gets harder for you to move around. You know, if you don't educate yourself and learn things, life gets harder. It gets harder to make decisions. It gets harder to make good decisions. So the more you challenge yourself, the less life is a challenge to you. So, you know, like an athlete, they push themselves to the absolute limit because they want to challenge themselves more, so that life, when it comes down to it, life doesn't challenge them.
Sure. You know, there was a great property developer called Howard Simon, and he was kind of before Donald Trump's time. But he won a Nobel Prize for his contribution to occupational management. And he said this, that it is absolutely impossible for us to have all the information that we need to make a decision. And people do this to themselves. They think, I can't move forward because I haven't got all the information. And if you remember earlier, we said, you know, it's impractical for us to think that we're going to have all the information to make an unbiased decision. So there's always a bit of fear and there's always a bit of risk in moving forward. And that's just part of growing. It's not there as your roadblock, you know, in your way. It's on the journey. It's on the road. It's on your way. It's on your way to where it is that you want to go and do. So, Dan, unless you have anything to add in?
I just think this whole thing, it can be sort of summed up in the story. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Socrates story about the cave. Basically, humanity, he talks about our indoctrination is like we're prisoners in a cave. And we're forced to, from birth, to look at this wall in front of us. And we're shackled, we can't move. And there's shadows on the wall being played by a puppeteer behind us by a big fire. And he says, the people are convinced that the shadows are real. And they look and they see their own shadow and they see everyone else's shadow. And if someone talks, maybe there's an echo from the wall. It looks like the shadow's talking to you, but it's not. It's the person next to you, right? So one day, one of the prisoners breaks free, and he looks up and he sees the puppeteers in the fire show behind him. And he sees that they're passing fake trees and fake dogs and fake everything else. And at first he thinks the shadows on the wall are more real than that. Then something twigs and he realizes that that's more real. So he walks up and anyway, he walks past the puppeteer and he walks out through the cave. And he gets to the entrance of the cave and he's never been outside before. So at first he's blinded by reality and he doesn't know what's going on. And at first, as he steps out of the cave, the only thing that he can look at comfortably is the shadows of things. So he's still looking at shadows. And then as his eyes get more and more accustomed, he's able to see the stars at night. And then he sees his own reflection in the river. And then eventually he's able to see the sun, not just its reflection in the river, but in its all its glory in the sky. And I think that's the challenge, is to break free of that cave and get out. And that's, that's what this is all about, really.
Great. So we really, really hope today, thank you so much for that, Dan. We really hope that we've inspired you today, that we've given you some things that you can take into your life, that you can wake up tomorrow and start to have a new day, that you can wake up tomorrow and realize that everything, most of the stuff that you've been told about failure is absolutely, completely and utterly wrong. You're sitting today listening to from my perspective, I failed everything in school, absolutely everything. So you're sitting today listening to two, when you went to school, if there was a stupid kid, well, you've just listened to him, and that's me. So thanks and Dan is absolutely, same for you, for sure. So this is probably the first time that an Englishman and an Irishman have been able to sit in one room together for an hour. But look, we got through it, and thanks for being with us today, Dan. Appreciate it.
No, thank you very much, man. It's been a pleasure.